because you are here with Team Arena for our panel Fighting Back Against Trump, featuring all of these amazing panelists who we're going to introduce in just a second. We're excited to have you here, and we're really grateful to our panelists for their time. Before we dive in, just a few quick things. This panel is part of the Power Rising Summer series, and so we have more events coming up along the summer. If you like this event, there's more for you, so we'll share more about what we have coming up soon. And a few little housekeeping notes. We are going to stay on mute, so please leave your microphone muted. We're going to use the Q&A function on Zoom for questions. So if you drop a question in the chat's moving too fast for us to find it. Click on the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen that say more, and you should find a little like speech bubble with a question mark in it. That's the Q&A. You can put your questions in there and we'll be sure to see them that way. The next thing is if you start spamming the chat, you will get a little warning. If you keep spamming the chat, we're going to remove you from the Zoom. It's nothing personal. We're just trying to have a panel here. Maybe we'll have a spam the chat event later on and you can come do your thing at that. Then never fear if you're going to ask us. I know you're going to ask, is this being recorded? Yes, this panel is being recorded. We're going to send a follow-up email, and the resources that we share, anything that is shared in the chat by the panelists during the call, we will send it back out to you in an email. The last thing is we're going to give you a feedback survey. We need your feedback. We appreciate your feedback. We hope you'll take that survey and tell us how we did. And we use that feedback to make all of our future events better for you. So that's what I have to say about that. And now it's time to talk about our sponsors. We are appreciative to Google, Running Mate, Grassroots Analytics, Ripple, and Winnable for their financial sponsorship of our Power Rising Summer. If you're part of an organization that wants to sponsor, let us know. We also are in partnership with a ton of great organizations. Vote Save America, Run for Something Action Fund, Voters of Tomorrow, etc. We're going to open a poll right now. If you want to get connected with any of these partner organizations, let us know in the poll and we will connect you directly with them. So Vote Save America, Run for Something Action Fund, Voters of Tomorrow, Higher Ground Labs, 95 and 35, The First Ask, Democracy, Forum NYC, the Center for Artistic Activism, New Disabled South Rising, Dirt Road Organizing, DEM Power Labs, Progressive Pipeline, Supermajority, Sync Collective, Pipeline Fund. If your organization wants to partner with us, we would love to have you. Let us know after this, and we will talk about what partnership looks like and how to get that going. We're going to leave this poll open for just a few more minutes, or I guess a few more seconds. It's almost been a minute. We've got 30% participation, kind of a low turnout election. I think we can do better than that. Here we go. We're getting close to 40. Make a plan to vote. Yeah. And if you have questions about any of these organizations, let us know. You can shoot us an email, training@arena.run, and we'll be happy to share more information. Okay. It is time now to introduce our panelists for our panel Fighting Back Against Trump. So we can stop the screen share. We're going to start spotlighting people. So get excited. My name is Jess Weldon. I am going to be moderating this panel. I am the training director here at Arena. And I am excited to introduce Mandela Barnes, who is the president of Power to the Polls Wisconsin and the former lieutenant governor of Wisconsin. So let's give it up in the chat for Mandela Barnes, who is joining us. We also have Terry Bermea, who is the executive director of Battleground Texas, a fellow Texan. Excited to have Terry Bermea up on the panel. And we have April Fournier, who is a Portland City Councilor and is also the Fellows Director at Native Organizers Alliance. We have Dom Kelly, who is the founder, president, and CEO of New Disabled South Rising. Chloe Maxman, who is the co-director of Dirt Road Organizing. Casey Moody, who is at SCIU working on their Together We Rise program. And There's Casey. Hi, Casey. And last but not least, we have Yasmin Raji. Yasmin is the executive director of Swing Left. So let's give it up for all of our panelists. And we're excited to have you. Maybe if we could get all of our panelists spotlit together. So if y'all want to raise your hand, it'll help us find you to spotlight you. But we'll get our whole panel spotlit. And we are going to kick it off with our first question. So I did not read bios. I think it's a little bit awkward to read out bios. So I'm going to let panelists introduce themselves. And we will start with Mandela Barnes. Will you tell us a little bit about you?
For sure. And the only thing more awkward than getting your bio read is having to read your own bio. So going to be as brief as possible. I'm Mandela Barnes, as mentioned, former Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, current president of Power to the Polls Wisconsin, which is an organization that focuses on mobilizing new and infrequent voters. Our mission, our charge is to create the most informed electorate, because ultimately, when people have the right information, it leads them to make right choices.
Awesome, thanks. Terry, who are you?
Hi everyone. I'm Terry Bedmay. I'm the executive director here at Battleground Texas. We are an organization dedicated to empowering and creating lifelong voters who haven't traditionally been involved in the political process. I always take a quote from one of my sheroes to say that me siento muy excited to be here with all of y'all. And I just want to say I know things are really heavy right now, so I'm really grateful to be in this space with all of y'all to talk about this really important work that we're all doing. So thank you.
Awesome, thanks. And April.
Hey everybody, April Fournier, she, her pronouns. I am Dene, or a citizen of the Navajo Nation. I reside in Portland, Maine on Wabanaki territory, but I'm currently in Montgomery, Alabama at a conference. But I am the Fellows Director for Native Organizers Alliance, but I'm also an elected official. So I am an at-large city councilor in Portland, the first Native person ever elected to city council there, and really just love being able to serve and bring my voice and unique perspective to that place. But so great to be with all of you. I know we'll jump into all of the work that we're doing.
Thanks so much, April. And Dom.
Hey everyone, Dom Kelly, he and they pronouns, based in Atlanta, Georgia, on Mesquite Creek land. Brief visual description for anyone who has blind or low vision, white person, black t-shirt, bunch of stuff behind me, tattoos all over me, and glasses. I am the founder and CEO of New Disabled South Rising, C4, and our C3 New Disabled South. We're the first only regional disability organization in the country, and we are working to build political power for disabled folks in 14 southern states.
Thanks, Dom. Chloe.
Hi everyone, my name's Chloe Maxman. I am also from Maine. I always love being with fellow Mainers, especially April. I co-direct Dirt Road Organizing. We support and train rural progressives across the country who are running for office, staffing campaigns, and organizing.
Thanks. Casey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey Moody. I'm a senior local strength coordinator on SEIU's Together We Rise team. And the Together We Rise team really focuses on supporting local unions in building power through leadership development, internal organizing, strategic campaigns. We're really focused on strengthening unions across the country as much as we can, including on their COPE, which is their political PAC.
Thanks. And last but not least, Yasmin.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you. I'm Yasmin Raji. I use she, her pronouns, based in Washington, D.C., originally from the great state of California. I run an organization called Swing Left, which exists to channel volunteer and donor energy into the most competitive districts, both federally and at the state level, all around the country. And I also run our nonpartisan affiliate called Vote Forward, which exists to empower volunteers on heavily research-backed tactics that can be scaled to lead primarily volunteer turnout and occasionally some voter registration. And I'm a career-long organizer. And because Mandela is here with me, I will also give a shout out to my first real organizing work was on the Obama campaign, but I really cut my teeth in congregation organizing like Mandela. And so I'm always excited to be with folks who have done organizing in really different venues, and excited to talk about that here.
Awesome, thanks. Well, then let's get into it. Obviously, we're watching this administration do all kinds of wild things, undermining fundamental rights, disregarding the Constitution and the courts, governing by fear. There's a whole long list. I think we all know we're in chaotic times. Can you please share how the work you're doing is fighting back against that while also building power long term? And Terry, maybe I'll start with you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Battleground Texas, we work really hard to not just register, but create new lifelong voters by ensuring that we meet people where they are and being in places that maybe others aren't, right? We do a lot of relational organizing to build relationships and build trust in our communities. And we're really proud of this work because we see that our registrants turn out at higher rates than the national and statewide average because of the relationships that we're creating with them at the time that they register from that point to the time that we vote. And another thing that we really focus on here at our organization, and it's another reason why we love Arena, is that we really are focused on training and empowering the next generation of organizers, leaders in the space. And we're really proud of our alumni who have gone on to run for office and become elected officials. We have a lot of people that go on and run campaigns at the national, state, local level. And then just really proud of the work that we're doing in collaboration with organizations like Arena and other organizations across our state of Texas. So that's a little bit about what we do. And again, just grateful to be here in the space with everyone.
We're glad to have you. Awesome. April, what about y'all?
Thanks. So I'll talk really more about Native Organizers Alliance and the work that we're doing now, and we can eventually get into city council stuff if you're really interested. So with Native Organizers Alliance, we're a national Native American-led organization that really works to build power from the grassroots up. And so we know our communities are the most knowledgeable about their own people, about their own lands, and about their own issues. And so we don't ever go anywhere that we're not invited. So when we're invited in, we work on training, we work on power building, we work on leadership development, but really trying to allow our communities to really feel their own power, to be able to step into their sovereignty, step into their self-determination, and battle back against everything that's been happening to our people since this country was founded. So I think what we're seeing now with the Trump administration, we've been there, we've done this. We've actually lived this life over and over and over again. And so what we're really doing in this moment is trying to go back into our communities with more regional, more state-based focus to see what are the different issues that they need support and resources for, to be able to do that, build that power locally and start to develop that next generation of leaders. When we think about how we're addressing this moment, I think one of the unique things about our community is we're actually looking always at the next 7 generations. So yes, this moment is chaotic, and we need to do things to address that, but our people have been organizing for the last 7 generations and will keep organizing for the next 7 generations. And so the way at which we approach this work is really thinking about how are we organizing and moving around the obstacles in this moment, but what can we anticipate is going to happen next generation and the generation after that, so we can prepare for that right now. So I'm really, really grateful to be here with all of you.
Thanks. We're so glad to have you too. Dom.
Thank you. Want to quickly shout out Mel Moore, who's our new assistant director at New Disabled South Rising, in the chat. New Disabled South and New Disabled South Rising are regional disability rights and justice organizations, and we work in 14 states. We really work to build political power among disabled folks, a group of us who have historically been disenfranchised, and also left out of many movement spaces. So we are both trying to build a base of mobilized, engaged disabled people. We do that through policy and legislative advocacy, community organizing. We do original research. We do narrative change and strategic comms work. And we have a coalition of disability rights and justice groups and organizers across the South that like work together on really working to see systems change in our lifetime and improve the lives of our community. And I'll just say that in the South, we have the highest population of disabled people out of any region in the country. A third of all disabled people in the U.S. are in the U.S. South, the majority of whom are Black and brown folks, are queer folks, and are disproportionately impacted by the realities of policy choices in these states that are continually gerrymandered and disenfranchised. Most of our folks live in poverty and don't have the same kind of access to civic engagement and don't have the same opportunities that non-disabled folks do. And so we do political education. We have a whole artivism, body systems of care for each other.
I'm not sure if I froze or if Dom might have frozen.
I think Dom froze.
Oh no, Dom, I don't know if you were finished talking. If you were not finished talking, we will come back to you as you revive. Chloe, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I grew up in a small rural town of 1,600 people in Maine. And when I was in high school in 2009, the partisan lean in rural America was dead even. By the time I went away, I went to college and came back in 2016 when Trump was elected, the partisan lean amongst rural voters had lurched to the right by 16 points, and now it's well over 25 points. And so at Dirt Road, our theory of change really revolves around the idea that our path to a just and equitable society and democracy runs straight through rural America, that so much of what we're seeing in our country right now stems from rural places, and the void that the left has left by not always with intention, but it's just how the cookie has crumbled. And also the work that we need to do to regain that ground in spaces where we once had a lot of ground. So we run a training program for candidates and for staffers. We support folks who are doing that deep work of movement building, of building bridges, and really like what it takes to go out there and reconnect and rebuild some of the trust that has been lost. And to us, that's how we meet this moment and directly confront the extremism and the strands of authoritarianism that are taking over our country.
Thanks, Chloe. And I will also plug that y'all are recruiting your next round of, okay, awesome. Yes, so we will drop links for your next cohort too, if you're interested.
Yes, please apply. We're running 2 more cohorts in 2025, and we would love to have everyone come our way.
Awesome. And Dom is back. Dom, were you finished talking?
Sorry about that.
Sure. No,
I
that's
definitely
yesterday.
I was just wrapping it up. So yeah, I'm good. Sorry about that, y'all.
No worries. And I will also say New Disabled South Rising has a speaker series coming up. We'll drop links for that. There's one next week. Is that right?
On
Yes.
Tuesday, I believe. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. Casey.
Sorry, I'm new to Zoom, so I was like, where's the mute button again? But I found it. Um, so again, I'm with SEIU on the Together We Rise team. So we work directly with local unions to strengthen them through building grassroots power. So, and we kind of tie that power into the political sphere, especially through our PAC, our COPE PAC. But we are really focused on training people at the individual level to be leaders in their community, leaders in their workplaces, and tie those workplace battles to the broader political battles, especially with public unions where they have the unique ability to elect their bosses. So we tie that into their workplace issues, that these people that you elect, those are the bosses that are creating these policies, these scenarios for you. So being politically active is an important part of your job.
Thanks. All right, Yasmin.
It is so wonderful hearing from all these incredibly inspiring people. I think something that we at Swing Left have noticed is that a lot of people, whether they are potential volunteers, potential donors, or sort of longtime folks in the movement, are asking a simple question of what they can do. And underneath that question is sort of a doubt and a wonder of whether the thing that they're being asked to do drives impact. And they really, in general, obviously we all want to win elections and we care about impact. But I think in this moment, after the last election, there is a lot more sort of doubt and distrust about whether folks are being honest with them when they're answering that question. And so our lane is exclusively in answering that question in the electoral space of making sure that whether someone is investing their time, whether that's to knock on doors, to write letters, to make phone calls, that time is being invested wisely in the right districts and the right timeline and using the right smart tactics. And whether they're investing their precious dollars, whether those are just a few dollars that are meaningful to them, whether it's a lot of dollars that are still meaningful to them, that they are going to the campaigns that really need those dollars to win. And a lot of folks come to us because it's hard to cut through the noise. They are asked a million things and they can't tell the difference between a campaign that is really good at marketing to them, but actually isn't competitive, or a campaign like Mandela's when he ran both for lieutenant governor and also for Senate, where the marginal differences between dollars and voter contact shifts makes a really big difference and can actually change the future of the country. So in this moment, we are remaining really true to our mission, but I think what has changed for us is that we're seeing that a lot of folks are confused about how the electoral piece fits in a moment of heightened urgency around more immediate needs, right? It feels hard to talk about the 2026 midterms and the urgency of winning back the House as a material check on Trump when folks are seeing, as you rightly framed up front, what's happening in Los Angeles when people's lives are being harmed right now. And so our orientation is there is incredible work happening. We see it as kind of a three-legged stool. The litigation work that is essential to making sure that we are fighting Trump in the courts. There are incredible organizations doing work there, and a lot of our volunteers and donors are really active in that space. There is also the incredible and important and essential advocacy work, whether that's showing up at town halls, whether that is going to protests, whether that is supporting in sort of more direct service ways. All of that is really, really important. And we really see sort of everybody's budgets as also needing to include taking the time to invest in elections. And so we see 2025 as a year of getting folks in what we call the net of this work of everyone needs to be aware of what's at stake with the House. They need to become aware of what races really matter. We also need to win some key Senate races, governor's races, state legislative races, state Supreme Court races, including a big win in Wisconsin that we've already had. And then we want to make sure that that net is very, very full and that we start to kind of unleash that net as we get closer and closer to the election. So right now we've got folks who are already knocking on doors, doing Republican accountability work and recruiting volunteers and voters in competitive districts, folks already raising dollars in districts where we know we need to defeat Republicans, but there might be competitive primaries. So we're raising those dollars for what's called nominee funds, money that goes to whoever the Democratic nominee ends up being, and much more. But I think anyone on this call who's interested in that electoral piece of the budget with an eye toward winning majorities that put a material check on Trump, we would love to be a home for you among your sort of broader home of activism.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then Mandela.
Yeah, thanks so much. It is really difficult to follow up. Everybody's incredible work that they are doing, but our work is specific to the state of Wisconsin, the consummate battleground state, the state you always hear about, and the state that will always matter till the end of time. And that's just the reality of it. It's a very unique place, very unique people, and to address this very unique population, it takes hard work. It takes ongoing communication and engagement. It takes real relationship building, and coming out of congregation-based organizing, I'm able to put those same principles into play in the way that we engage the communities that we have been talking to for the last several years. Now, the organization was around for about a year before I came on board, but we had a plan to totally revamp it and turn it from just a turnout operation into a year-round organization. People had talked about the Supreme Court race that we just had in April, where, well, our organizers have been back out on doors already for like the last 4 weeks. One, thanking all the new voters who showed up. There was a surge in new voters, and we have the data. We just had a briefing a couple weeks ago. We have the data that shows in the wards where we were present, and I'll go back and remind you that we focus specifically on those infrequent voters or new voters. When we show up to the doors, if it's not the person that's on the list, we still talk to them. We still make sure they know exactly what's going on. But we have the data that shows that only within the wards that we were present in, and these aren't the doors that the party's knocking on, they aren't the doors that the campaigns are knocking on. These are the doors that we have taken the time and put the attention into. Well, that data shows that in those wards, those voters accounted for over half of the total new statewide voters. And so we're incredibly excited about that work because it's what needs to happen. I love having all the attention on Wisconsin in these election cycles, but it would be nice to have a little bit of a cushion and not, to have some buffer these days. I think it would serve our democracy better, and having more people involved in the process is how we get through this chaos. And like I said, we've been out knocking on doors. Part of that is thanking those new voters for showing up, but it is also talking to people and getting their thoughts and opinions about what is going on and how they can stand up and resist this administration, how they can stand up against these totally disgusting tactics that are being employed or deployed, and also educating people about those potential Medicaid and Medicare cuts. And we also have our state budget going on, and we are talking to people about what is and what is not in our state budget. And we are training people to become advocates so that they can stand up, and that it goes from the information coming from power to the polls to the power ultimately being transferred to the people where it should have been in the first place.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think this is a really good segue. I mean, hearing all of y'all talk, it's really heartening to hear how we're all kind of approaching this work from our own niche, but we're all working together towards a very important goal of, building this multiracial democracy that actually is a functioning democracy. So very grateful to each of you for all of your work. I think right now, in this moment that we're in, we're seeing this intensification, particularly around the ICE raids that we're seeing. There's a lot going on all around the country. In LA, we have a lot going on, and obviously the administration is responding to that. Communities are responding to that. I'm curious, Casey, I'll kick it to you first about your thoughts, takeaways from what we've seen going on in the past week, few days, anything that y'all think we should be doing as individuals and organizations, particularly in this moment, to respond?
No pressure. That's such a big question. Say that again. Oh, okay. I think it's, maybe this isn't the politically correct answer, but I think it's up to each individual what they do and how they get involved. Some people are more comfortable protesting and going out into the streets. Some people, that's not their ministry. They're gonna donate to something. They're gonna write letters. They're gonna write postcards or something like that. So I think it's up to each individual person to do something. Like we cannot sit back and do nothing, but I think it's up to each individual person to look within themselves and see where they want to be in the movement and what speaks most to them. And then there's another part of the question.
Do you think there's anything that like organizations should be doing? And also, I will just quickly note, panelists, if you feel like you want to jump in or you have something to add, yeah, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll kick it over to y'all. So Casey, you're free to keep going, but
okay. So I think organizations, again, it's up to each individual organization, but I think at the very least, they should say something. come out against these ICE raids, come out against bring in the National Guard to go up against protesters. Like, at the very least, you should say something about that. SEIU has hosted protests all over the country, especially when David Huerta was arrested. And that's where we stand. But again, it's up to each individual organization and each individual person to see where they fit in this movement. I'll pass it to April.
Thank you so much. I absolutely agree. And I think it's such a great point that you made about not everyone has the privilege or the ability to resist in the same way. And not every community is affected in the same way. And so I think being able to recognize we have different ways to step into this work is really, really important. I think one of the things that has been a little bit frustrating for me, I'm on like a 15-day road trip to go to different conferences talking about like this moment and how important organizing is as Indian country, is there still is a sense of a lack of urgency and kind of almost this frozen position that so many national organizations, civic engagement organizations, I think are taking, because it's the first time a lot of them have been faced with something like this. And so I think one of the things that's so important that we underscore in all of the work that we do at Native Organizers Alliance is organizing is all about building relationships, and the political movements or changing and moving power moves at the speed of trust. And so if you don't have those relationships within your community, I think you're not going to be able to get this multiracial, multi-generational movement in your city to go out and resist what's happening if you haven't built those relationships and made those connections. And just a real quick story, I got a text on Tuesday morning from one of my constituents in Portland, Maine, that was walking to work and said, I'm on my way to work. There is a car pulled over with two gentlemen. One is black, one is brown, and there are 5 unmarked cars that have pulled this car over. And so I'm just standing on the other side of the street, recording this, keep yelling out to them, asking, who are you? Identify yourselves. And, the agents that were there, they just had vests, they were plain clothes, it said FBI on it. And he couldn't get them to respond, but he just stood there and kept recording and talking to the driver and the passenger from across the street saying, I'm getting all this. I'm trying to reach out to all of my connections and make sure that people just know that this is happening in this moment. And eventually the two were able to leave and no one was detained. But I wonder what would happen if you didn't have an engaged community member show up and document and stay in relationship with those two. He didn't know the driver, he didn't know the passenger, but he just stayed in relationship and stayed connected to them in that moment to say, I'm here, I'm with you. I want to make sure that you're going to be okay. If we're able to do that in every community, to have those relationships, to be in good circles with each other, I think that is one of the best ways to resist. That's how you get 100,000 people out in the street showing up for each other, is by doing that relational organizing. And so that's the foundation and the backbone, I think, of how we keep moving in this moment.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, Casey and April agree 100% with everything that you're saying. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I had the 3 S words that I keep thinking about, right? And Mandela and April both said them: stand up, step in, strategize, and stay safe. I think those are 3 things that we should all be doing right now, right? You figure out how you're going to step in or stand up for this, right? Based on what you're able to do physically and also emotionally and mentally, right? Because this is really heavy stuff, and we have to be mindful of that as well. And I think in the strategizing section, right, there are so many organizations that do this work. So working with your organization of choice with what you're passionate about, and us as organizations that have been in this space, or even if we're new, training people on how to be strategic and intentional about what we're doing. And then I think we all have to stay safe. There are so many, it's very crazy out there right now. And I think that organizations need to be training on that, right? When you are engaging other people to do the work with you, I think it's so crucial that you're training them on how, like, knowing their rights, knowing what to expect if you go to a protest or a rally, clothes you should wear, things like that are also important. And so I think that, those are some of the things that I think are incredibly important if you're new to the space or if you've been in it for a long time. make sure that you are training with your own knowledge, or if you're an organization doing the same.
Thanks, Yasmin. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, first of all, really appreciate all the thoughtfulness from my co-panelists on this very important and heavy question. Something that I've been thinking a lot about is I feel like there's a little bit of an incoherence between the way that we are all collectively talking about this moment of we are rightfully saying we are on the brink of authoritarianism. We've been saying that throughout the election. We've been saying that since the election. And if anybody doubted it for whatever reason, just, looking at what's happening in California should be a real wake-up call to anybody who has not been taking that seriously. And we're talking about that in a very serious way. And then a lot of the ways that we are acting do not cohere with how we're talking about it. And so I do think something that's really been on my mind is I think we've talked about it in sort of moments as a movement and as a Democratic Party and as a progressive movement. But if we really, really believe that we are on the brink of authoritarianism, some of the ways that we are calling people to act feel sort of like quaint, right? They don't feel serious about this moment. And so, I don't think it is up to every organization to be everything to everybody, but I do think that we all, one of our volunteers said to us very early in the year, if you all feed us reheated leftovers from 2024, I'm out. And I thought that was like a really good way to put it, of we are in a very different political paradigm than any of us have lived through in this country. Some of us maybe have lived through in other countries. And so, that is not a therefore X tactic is in and Y tactic is out. But I do think there needs to be a seriousness about being really honest with one another about what works and what doesn't work. And also, what are the things that worked in a different political paradigm that gotta go now? So I think that's a macro point. And the more specific, I think there is we've got to be sort of integrating two contradictory things, which is, like I mentioned earlier, it feels we have an amazing board member who gets a lot of calls from candidates to give them checks. And the first question that she asks on every one of those calls is, what are you doing today to materially help people's lives? And no matter how competitive that candidate is, if they do not have an answer to that question, she's not interested in hearing about what their path to victory looks like. And we are in an entirely electoral organization. So we are here to win the midterms. We want to win the House as a first priority. We are focused on that. We are not a direct service organization. We are not going to be one. But something that we talk about a lot, both at the staff level, we have 550 volunteer-led groups, 450 volunteer-led groups around the country, 1 million volunteers and members around the country. And it is very important that each of us, and I say this myself included as a citizen, not just as an executive director, that we think about our own budgets of time and money through a moral lens of, I live in a majority Latino neighborhood in DC where the conversation about deportations is not a theoretical one that, folks are going to read about on Twitter. It is a conversation that is happening at the park every single day, and folks are not going to the public library because they're afraid of ICE raids at the public library. So I am thinking about not should swing left do something about that. It's irrelevant to swing left. It is not irrelevant to me as a neighbor in my community. And so we've had staff, take half a day off of work to go and speak in a local town hall, to go and show up for their neighbors in certain ways. And I feel a lot of urgency in sort of imagining ourselves holistically, as my co-panelists have said, that is different for everybody. Everyone has different abilities, different, needs, different desires, live in different places. But I do think we need to be able to walk and chew gum on the immediate, on the service, while also thinking about the long-term power building of no matter how much I do for my neighbors in, talking about their rights, making sure that they've got on speed dial friends of mine who can help them legally should they need to. We're going to be SOL if we don't win power to actually put a check on Trump and slow the bleeding of this moment. And I think if we choose between one or the other, collectively, we've got it wrong. But individually, some folks are going to need to focus on one or the other because we also got families and jobs and things to do in our lives. So yeah, so I think it is a constant sort of looking at oneself in the mirror and seeing like, am I showing up as fully as is possible and as ambitiously as is possible for me? And that answer is not just different individually, but is pretty fluid. You know, a year from now, someone might have a child that they didn't have today. And so that answer might shift over the course of that time period.
I see you nodding along. Do you want to add to this?
I mean, yeah, and I just thought, oh, I could probably tie this into the next question, but I mean, everything everyone just said, I think the one thing I'll add is that I think this moment really calls for real solidarity between our movements and real cross-movement work. And I know everyone on this call understands that. So I'm like preaching to the choir here, but it's just I have to remind myself of this, and I think it's critical that like if we're talking about immigration, we are talking about every marginalized community because every single marginalized identity intersects with another in some way. And so I think it's critical for us, whether it's as organizations or individual organizers or just members in our communities, to be thinking about this moment, the future, and what our liberation looks like, and that we can't get there without each other. So it has to include all of us. And I have some like more tangible organizing things around that too. But I think just solidarity and a focus on our cross movement, I think, is really
Yeah, do you
critical.
want to take us in? So our next question is around best practices for organizing. So we'll start with Dom, since you're already kind of taking us there. Are there any best practices from your own work that you feel like are so effective that other people should know about them? Can we cross-pollinate our ideas and get ourselves to a place where we're using these like fundamental organizing tactics from a multidisciplinary lens? Dom, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, so I think just tangibly, it is really important, and I'm going to speak from the disability lens because that's what I do. That if we're talking about being out in community and organizing folks, if we're talking about events, if we're I'm not even thinking about canvassing during election cycles, but that too, of course, is like we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be a part of that organizing work. And like through a disability lens, that means like basic stuff like making our events accessible. Making sure that like we are our the platforms we use to communicate with people are screen reader accessible. Like there are some kind of basics to accessibility that I think are just really critical to making sure that everybody can be involved, and that there aren't those barriers that almost always are unintentional. Uh, I have plenty of like things I can share about, making canvassing accessible, making, specific events accessible and checklists and things like that. But really, I think I'm thinking about access as a whole, and that includes like costs, right? That includes like the realities that so many people are trying to, just keep a roof over their heads or put food on the table. And so, what kind of events or things am I planning that are low to no cost and make people feel a part of our movement and a part of the work? So accessibility is also, wrapped up in affordability and thinking about class and socioeconomic status. And then I think too, how we talk about our issues is really important. And one of I think one of the things that we do that I'm most proud of is that we are really in our political education and in our issue education, we really make sure that we are talking about issues in a way that is easy to understand and is digestible for people. Like we developed a tool called the Plain Language Policy Dashboard, and it translates state level bills that are moving through state legislatures into plain language so that folks can like actually understand. And that's not just for, folks with intellectual developmental disabilities. That's for everybody. I read bills all the time and I have to read them like 10 times sometimes because I don't understand what they're saying. And that's why we developed this tool. And we did the same thing with ballot measures last election cycle. We translated ballot measures into plain language, so voters were informed. And I think that's an example of just making sure that when we talk about issues, when we message them to people, we're not doing it in a way that's wonky, that's over people's heads. That's part of being culturally competent. It's part of, understanding that not every single person, understands what Medicaid is. Not every single person understands how Congress works. We have to really think about like the way that we're talking about these issues. And plain language, I think, is just a really great like tool or in like a framework and a way of thinking about how we can do that.
Thanks, Chloe. And then if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free to raise your hand. And Chloe, you could kick it to whoever has their hand up.
Sure, sounds good. I know Heather Cox Richardson is a really popular name, and some folks on here may know her. She actually, when I was a state senator, she lived in my district, and I was so proud to have her as a constituent for a very short period of time. But she did a video recently where she was talking about when in her studies of authoritarian regimes that the main force of resistance is community. And so when I think about community in a rural context, it looks a little bit different. Most rural communities, not all rural communities, but most of them are quite conservative. And so that community is going to be built up of folks who voted for Trump. Maybe some of them agree with what's happening right now. A lot of them don't. And so that's kind of the lens that I bring to it. I think in terms of the best practices that I use in our work is continuing to have an open heart and an open mind for the folks that could be on our side, but maybe aren't because we just haven't had that conversation, and what it looks like to have a conversation with those folks, that it's a very values-based conversation. Maybe we're not arguing about policy or anything in particular that an elected official has done, but really digging down into the values that impact our lives, the way that we're trying to live our lives, and how we can come together around that. And I just always want to say really clearly that I'm not talking about going and talking to the hard right MAGA folks, the folks who were there on January 6th. That's not what I'm talking about. There is a whole swath of folks in this country who are middle, who are right of middle, who who voted for Trump. And so I feel so blessed to be working with folks who are doing rural organizing right now, who are campaigning in rural districts. And it's sad because when I ran for office in 2018 and 2020, and I felt like I had to work really, really hard to get a Republican to have a conversation with me. I had to, say, I had to use the D word, Democrat, but I'm a good Democrat, it's okay, and just kind of calm people down to be able to just begin the process of creating a relationship where we could talk across our political differences. And that work is so much harder now. And I have a fear that because it's so hard, that we are going to let those silos stay up and just get stronger and thicker and bigger. And that to me is really scary. I think this work and this process of trying to climb over that wall and speak across political differences is, like Casey was saying earlier, it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to do it or feels safe doing it. Not everyone lives in a rural community, or wants to live in a rural community. And so I think there's a lot of nuance to it, but I think that practice of continuing to reach beyond and understand the kind of the folks that voted for this regime is important, and not just writing them off. And I will throw it to April.
Thank you, Chloe. I think that's such a good point. And, one of the things that we learn how to organize is really by being led by the community and going in and having those conversations and building those relationships. I think one of the communities that is probably most disaffected when it comes to electoral politics is Indian country. It doesn't matter if it's D or R, they've been screwed over kind of by both sides. And so when we were doing organizing in the Crow reservation this last fall, we talked to youth, we talked to elders, and what we got were some very honest answers. They didn't see a connection to how their vote immediately impacted things like Medicare, which most of them receive, SNAP, which most of them receive, housing, healthcare, all of those things are intertwined, but they yet didn't really make the connection to how their vote impacted those directly. And by design, a lot of our communities are undereducated. They don't have the resources. IHS and Bureau of Indian Education have never been fully funded to realize these trust and treaty obligations that the government has had to them since the country was founded. And so I think there is some mistrust that we have to overcome when we're doing organizing, not just within Indian country, but within so many different communities that have been left behind by these two big political machines. It doesn't matter whether it's DRR, they kind of are all feeling that, well, this is not for me. So I just don't want to participate. So it goes with that trust building, it goes with that community building, it goes with the listening more than we're talking. And I think one of the things we're really proud about of what we do at Native Organizers Alliance, and even as a city councilor, is I have to be able to go and listen and have the hard conversation. So I have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think far too many of us enjoy a privilege of living in comfort and not having to confront a lot of this on a regular basis. So we have to really lean into some of this discomfort, listen to people that don't agree with us almost as much as, if not more than, the people that do. Because the people that do, I'm so grateful everyone on this webinar, is probably thinking in very similar directions that I am. And I'm so glad that we get to have these conversations, but it's even more important for me to have connections and contact with people that don't agree, so we can find out where does our shared humanity align so that we can resist what's happening to our greater community and seeing that impact. And I will toss it over to Yasmin.
Really well said. I was just typing in the chat. Some of the pastors I used to do congregation organizing with would always say a saying of the work of justice is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, which I found tremendously resonant. I think our kind of core principles at Swing Left that I think are core principles to the organizations here across the screen are to start the work of talking to voters early, to have authentic and reciprocal conversations, and to really follow what works to drive impact. And so that means that, like I said earlier, we have to be honest about the things that we're finding that work and the things that don't work. And I'll share in the chat later a gift article to a piece that we had in the Atlantic this week about being transparent about some things that we did last cycle that didn't work as well as we wish that they had. And we think that that's really important across the ecosystem, to be really honest. But something I'm finding myself doing a lot of right now is reflecting on some of the best practices outside of our immediate space, because I don't think that we are getting everything right as a Democratic Party and as a movement. I think we have a lot of habits that we've got to disrupt. And one of the experiences that I had early in my organizing career that I haven't been able to get out of my mind, because I think it relates to these big questions of how do we fix the Democratic brand and how do we show up more authentically? And I think folks have sort of tried to simplify those answers with like, well, if we just have the right podcast, then we will solve all our problems. And that is just like, obviously so different from how any other way of doing work experiences these very complex questions. But I was thinking back to early in my organizing career in 2010, I was doing congregation-based organizing in San Antonio, Texas. And I was mostly working on the south side and on the east side of San Antonio. And most of my member congregations were Mexican-American Catholic congregations. And the sort of range of diversity was new immigrant congregations and sort of third, fourth generation Mexican-American congregations, almost exclusively Catholic. I am an Iranian American, somewhere between atheist and agnostic, from like deep, bright blue Northern California, Bay Area. I was a total fish out of water here. And one of the priests that I was working with said, I want you to help chair our evangelization team. And I was like, I'm not Catholic. I can't go door to door and talk to people about Jesus Christ being their Lord and Savior because that's not my religion. And he said to me in this launch of this campaign in the sort of early 2010, he said, evangelization is not about talking about Jesus Christ. It's about talking about the issues that keep people up at night. And that was the script that we went door to door. And the only question that we asked was, what are the issues keeping you up at night? And some folks answered in the ways that were really comfortable for me as an organizer. They said, our park is terrible and it's not as clean as the parks on the north side, and we need better funding. And so I could easily bring them onto our team to go lobby city council for more equitable budget decisions and so on and so forth. But honestly, a lot of the conversations were not super neat for me as an organizer, because they were things like, I literally cannot pay my air conditioning bill this summer. It is too high and I'm working 2 jobs, and all I can think about is the stress of how the hell am I going to pay this bill? And I could talk about the esoteric of like, well, the fight for a better wage in San Antonio or whatever, but like the person I was talking to didn't really care about that. They cared about like, today I need to figure out how to pay my bill. And what the church did that I thought was sort of outside of anything I could have imagined was they wrote down those notes in our walk list, and the church paid those bills and no questions asked. And then they invited those folks. They needed to come to job training seminars. If some of those folks ended up coming and helping to paint the church and doing things around to just make a little bit of extra money, but they just paid the bills and moved on from the conversation. And then there was a moment that was a sort of a radicalizing experience for me. We knocked on the door of a woman who was in really bad shape. Her husband had just passed away, and she had no money to pay for the funeral. She was really stressed out about how she was going to make a funeral happen. And then she talked to the priest, not to me, but to the priest as someone who'd not been to church in, decades. And she said, I also just feel really ashamed because we don't have any kids. We don't really have a lot of friends. We don't really know our neighbors. And I don't know, even if we could pay for a funeral, I don't think anybody's going to come. And I just feel really ashamed that I want to send off my husband, who I love so much, to a funeral with dignity. And I just don't have the ability to do that. And, the priest was an incredibly thoughtful person and had a really beautiful conversation with her. But more importantly, what he did is when we went back to the parish, he went to the head of the prayer group, who is this woman, so the prayer group was these like no nonsense women who just got everything done in the church. And he told them the story, and these women put together an action plan. They organized a funeral, they paid for the funeral, they packed the house in a way that made it look like this man was like the mayor of San Antonio. I mean, it was a packed house. And then they organized to make lasagna, make enchiladas, and bring food to this woman as though she was the most popular person in the neighborhood, even though they did not know her. And I'm sure there were plenty of reasons they didn't know her, right? She was probably just not leaving her house a whole lot. And to me, it was this moment of, I just realized like what the priest had said to me as this person who I grew up not just not in a religion, but like deeply, deeply skeptical of organized religion because of the trauma my family had experienced at the hands of religion in Iran. And I realized what the evangelization meant was, it was not telling people why they should come and be a part of this parish community. It was showing them that in their worst times, in the micro of I can't pay my bill, or in the macro of a moment that this woman was always going to remember the rest of her life, this community showed up for her. And they showed up for her, no questions asked, no strings attached, no, and now you've got to come to prayer group, just showed up. And I've been thinking about that a lot with this sort of like, what do we do from here? There are, of course, ingredients that have to do with messaging and how we show up on the internet. And like people have been saying in the chat, like, how do we stop being so obsessed with memes and actually do the work? But there is also something of like showing the brand rather than telling the brand, that I think some of the ways that we organize in campaigns and in politics is so late and so superficial that it's not that sort of like long arc of, I have not followed that woman. I don't have the data of whether she started becoming a member of that community. I don't know if this changed her behavior, but I sure as hell think the odds are higher that it did than if they'd left a pamphlet on her door and said, please come worship with us on Sunday. So all of that is sparking a lot of imagination for us at Swing Left of how can we learn from the ways that there are plenty of models of authentic, early, persuasive conversations, ways that organizations big and small, national, international, and local show up and really change people's minds. And that is not always, unfortunately, us as a Democratic Party. And so anyway, I think we are thinking big about what needs to change. We don't have the answer, so I'm not like hiding a secret answer that I have here. We are still in the process of figuring that out. But I do think, to the earlier point of we can't be reheating leftovers, I think we need to think much more expansively about the answers than we currently might be.
Thanks. I just want to do a quick time check. We have about 12 minutes left, and Casey, I know you might have to hop off, so I will kick it to you. Feel free to respond, or if there's anything that you would like to make sure we walk away with knowing, feel free to share that as well.
You always give me so much pressure. Like you have the final thought on this.
Casey, drop the mic right now and go.
So it kind of ties into what everyone was saying, but I think one thing that we can pull from union organizing is that it's all about building relationships with people. One of the best practices in union organizing is that you don't ask someone to sign a card or come out to an action until you know what their issues are. You don't until you know what they care about, until you know what makes them tick. So really building strong relationships with people, I think in this time that we're in is super important. And then also sharing your personal story. Why does this matter to you? Is it really, people may not remember your name, they may not remember the details about the conversation, but they'll remember the story you told. They'll remember the emotions that evoked. So using your own personal story to kind of move people to action, to kind of get people to where we need them to be in this time, and then building those relationships, I think is really important.
Thank you. All right, we have one question in the Q&A that I think we'll have time to answer, and I'd love to hear from Mandela and then Terry if you want to chime in. So these times are the worst deja vu, is what this person says. How do you see this moment as different than Donald Trump's first term, and what should we consider or do differently?
Okay, so I guess I can attempt to start this answer. It is different because it's so much worse. It's so much more competent. It's not as goofy as it was, the first go around. I think that there is this level of it's a lot more mature. The fascism is much more mature this go around. And when Yasmin mentioned showing up authentically, and people are stuck asking the question, like, how do Democrats show up more authentically? If you have to ask how to be authentic, then you're not being authentic. You just be yourself, be you. And if these are the issues that truly matter, then it will be very natural for you to show up authentically. And one thing we do in Power to the Polls, we're sure to, hire organizers from the community that they're showing up in. And when I go out there on doors, there's this baked in level of familiarity when they're talking to people. People run into somebody they knew from high school, or people they just have known their whole lives. And so for us to be able to, engage authentically, because I do think there's a difference between showing up authentically and engaging authentically. I think engaging authentically means that we just have regular conversations with people. That means we talk about the things that are, one, very apparent, and two, talk about the things as they affect us, as they impact us in our regular everyday lives. And it doesn't always come down to a policy conversation. We're not always having a political conversation. We're not talking about issues specifically. If we're using immigration as an example, we can speak about the devastation and the tragedy of what's going on, because that is a real conversation with somebody. And if a person is to put themselves in the shoes of someone they have never met before, never will meet before, and likely won't have that type of life experience specifically, but can draw parallels, that is how the conversation begins to change, and others can understand just how frightening all of this is, because it's just not real to a lot of people still, even in this moment. Even as you see the images on television, so much of it is just not real to too many people. And so to make it real, we have to do a lot of translation, a lot of filtering of the information.
Thanks. Terry, anything you would add?
No, I mean, yes, I agree with Mandela in terms of it being worse. It's more strategic, it's more sophisticated. There are a lot more people falling in line. And so that is definitely scary. I know here in Texas, our governor he's wild and he does some really messed up things. And this legislative session was pretty horrific. And so I think just it is more, it's more terrible than it was. But I think one of the things, and when Dom said this, y'all, I was like, because it was so true. Like, we have to keep it simple for people to understand, right? I think one of the things that we've been so terrible about doing is our messaging. We get so complex in how we describe things, and people want just like the basics on like how you, like to make it understandable for people. And I think that's one thing that we have to get really good at. It's something that we are working on here at Battleground and training our teams of volunteers and staff to have meaningful, intentional conversations. And a lot of that, so simple as listening to people, right? Listening to your community. And like April said, having those uncomfortable conversations where you may not agree with someone 100%, but there is some common ground, right? And I think, looking back at 2024, our messaging was so complex where Republicans were saying like we're going to lower the cost of eggs and we were just giving a whole novel of like other things, right? And so I think we just need to be more strategic in that regard. So that'll be my input for that.
Thanks. We have all about 5 minutes left. So there was so much that we could have talked about that we just didn't have time to. This is such an important conversation, and we're so grateful to all of our panelists and to all of our participants for being here. The last question I have is, for our panelists, is there anything that you absolutely want to make sure that we leave here knowing or being ready to go out and do? And I will kick it over to Chloe first.
Well, I'm a little bit biased in the perspective that I'm coming from, but run for office, help the person in your community who is aligned with our values and our fights get elected. That's my answer.
Thanks. April, do you have something to add?
Oh, I will absolutely build on that. As a local elected leader, I can absolutely tell you some of the things that you see at the federal level, at the state level. Those conversations start right in your own community and right in your own backyard. And there's no better way for people to see immediate impact and start to make those connections. Like, you can talk big sky picture and kind of this theoretical framework of democracy, but if you want to see it in action, look at your school board, look at your city council. Those are things that people can see tangibly in their backyard that affect them on a day-to-day basis. And so what we don't consistently have across the country is a deep bench for any of these positions. And so I know always in our city, for both school board and city council, we are scrambling to try and find someone to step into those positions because they don't see the value in it, or they're terrified to put themselves out there. So showing them how they can be protected, how they can have a balance of work and self-care, and then also how important it is for them to be able to serve the community in that capacity for everyone else around them. Because I know for voters, if you don't see someone serving in the community that represents you and your community, you are less likely to show up and participate. And so making sure that we are recruiting and building that deep bench of multiracial, multi-generational candidates that can connect back to the community is so critical. So if you are funding, if you are volunteering, if we want to be able to change the laws that are being implemented or defend the things that we have fought so hard to protect, we need to have people in every level of office, from school board all the way up to Congress, to do that work.
Thank you. Dom, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just to really piggyback on Chloe and April, I think it really our local communities are so critical in this moment, and all of what was said, absolutely. And I think that one of the best ways to organize and build a base is to help care for your neighbor and have those conversations. And I'm thinking about that because if these Medicaid cuts happen, millions of people are going to lose care and people are going to need help. So we're going to have to rely on community in a way that we haven't before. And that's an opportunity too to have tough conversations, to talk about our issues, to talk about our vision, to talk about our long arc generational, what do we want, like you had said, April, 7 generations down the line, what do we want our world to look like? And I think that's the perfect opportunity. So community and caring for each other, it's a great way to organize in this moment.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo a lot of what everyone else said, but one thing we always say is always be organizing. And like April mentioned, right, bringing new people into it. If you are an organizer and you are in a room and you know everybody in that room, then you're in the wrong room. You should be bringing more people into it, training more people, and just getting this movement to a larger scale than it already is. There's so many of us, and I guarantee you, when you're in these spaces, it's healing. It also is enraging sometimes, and it just lights a fire under you that you're like, okay, I have to go do this. Um, but I will also say again, like, really understand what your abilities are, because sometimes we want to do everything, and we can't. Like, I used to be like that, and now that I'm an elder millennial. Like, I can't be doing all of the things at once. And I know that, like, mental health wise and all of those things, you have to take care of yourself. So understand what your capabilities are as well. Um, and if you are good at something, get really good at it and focus on that, right? If you're really good at advocating and going to testify at the legislature, if you're really good at knocking on doors and connecting with people, if you're really good at training, go do that. Like, get really good at what you're doing, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself. I know this is so cliche, but it really is a marathon, and we can't just be sprinting this whole thing, because it will take a toll on you, emotionally, physically, mentally. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves as well. But don't give up and stay in this fight with all of us. And if you need help, there's so many people that can help train, and share experiences with you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mandela.
Yeah, so as this administration gets worse, I don't want to say we should get worse, but we should get more intense. And I do mean more intense in terms of how we show up and the numbers we show up in. And I never thought that I would use, Harvard as the example, but they've done it before. They've done it before, and they're doing it again. But look, what are they doing? They're suing the administration back. Like, that should be an example for us to not take any of this lying down. We meet the force with the force. We show up with every tool that we have. We show up with the legal routes. We show up, and everything we should do should be legal. Let me be clear. When I say legal routes, I mean through the courts and the justice system. But we also show up through the organizing routes. We also show up through the activism routes. We show up in every possible space. Where they are is where we should be. And we should also start showing up in some places they don't expect us to be. If they're going to try to exhaust us, we should just try to exhaust them right back.
Thank you. And we are right at time. So Yasmin, we're going to give you the last word. But before we do that, we have some events coming up next week and the week after. We're going to drop those in the chat for you. And we have a feedback survey. So please give us your feedback. You can do your feedback survey as Yasmin brings us home. I'll turn it over to you, Yasmin.
Most of us live within 90 minutes of a competitive swing district, even those of us who live in very blue places, like my home turf of the Bay Area, my current turf of Washington, D.C. So every single one of us has a role in winning competitive seats to win back power. And we have to do that in addition to all the other work that is happening, or things are going to get significantly worse. We've just got to put a material, real check on Trump. So we hope that everybody here has a plan to participate in the midterms. If you do not, and you'd like to participate as a volunteer and or as a donor at any level, you can come join us at swingleft.org. But no matter where you do the work, everybody has got to help us win the House, and also key races like the Senate, governors, state legislative races, state Supreme Court races. But without the House, we are in deep shit. So there we go. I don't know if we're allowed to cut, but here we are.
We were saying all the S words earlier. We can add that one in. Thank you all. We really appreciate it. Let's give it up in the chat for our panelists. That is our show. We're so grateful to Yasmin, April, Chloe, Dom, Terry, Mandela, and Casey had to leave a little bit early, but Casey Moody was with us too. We'll see you all next week. Panelists, have a great rest of your day. Participants, y'all can do the same, and we'll see you back on our next arena call on Tuesday of next week.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you so much.